Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the last event of Bad September. My name is Catherine Dupoulou-Ménager, and I'm the Artistic Director of Bad Sydney Crime Writers Festival. Now, how better to end a festival celebrating new books by four fabulous women than with Anne Cleeves' new book, A Heron's Cry. I'll begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of country throughout Australia. We recognise their continuing connection to land, to waters, and to culture. And we pay our respects to their elders, past and present. I'm today on Darkingham country. Before we start the interview, I also want to thank our sponsor, the City of Sydney, and Create New South Wales, without whom we would find life pretty much impossible, I think it's fair to say, particularly at the moment when you're pivoting, as I say, from one kind of event to another, depending on whether you're in lockdown or not. Thank you. We really appreciate your support. And we appreciate the support of Booktopia, our online bookseller, where you can buy all Anne's books. So just click on the link and go directly to the Bad Booktopia page to get the books. So I'm really delighted to welcome Anne Cleeves back to Bad. And you were with us last year talking to the poet Mark Treddinick about the first book in the Matthew Venn series, which I have here. And this year you're back talking to Sue Turnbull about the second book in the series. And we really hope one day you'll be here in person, and if the world ever changes back and becomes more normal. Anyway, in whatever case, welcome very much to Bad Sydney.
Thanks very much, and I look forward to being there with you.
Oh, it will be so nice. Now, everybody knows who Anne is, so I'm almost not going to introduce you, Anne. I mean, you know, we've all read your books. We've all seen, in particular, we've seen Shetland, we've seen Vera, and soon we're going to see Matthew Venn. So I'm sure Sue will be asking you about that. Sue Turnbull is Senior Professor of Communications and Media at the University of Wollongong, and she's not only is she a passionate crime fiction reader, but she's been reviewing crime for over 20 years. She's interviewed crime writers. She acts as a crime fiction judge. She's an ambassador for Sisters in Crime Australia, and she's also the chair of the Bad Sydney board. So she makes sure we're doing the right thing. Finally, I'd like to welcome all the members of the Bad community, and in particular, members joining us from all over the country. We had hoped to stream this talk, and indeed stream all the talks this month into regional libraries. Not possible, but what we have done is reached out to individual readers from those libraries, and they're joining us today. I have to read the list: from Bathurst, Camden, Glen Innes, Hawkesbury, Narromine, Newcastle, Richmond Tweed, Willoughby and Wallandilly. Now, apologies if I've missed anybody out. And Writing New South Wales is also joining us, so there may well be budding crime writers there, which is very exciting. Welcome, everyone. So on to the interview. Anne and Sue will talk for about 40 minutes, 45 minutes. Sue will remind you that you can send questions in using Q&A, and then she will ask them on your behalf. I'll come back very quickly at the end to say goodbye and to thank our speakers. Over to you, Sue.
Thank you very much indeed, Catherine. And I could not be more delighted to be interviewing Anne tonight. But of course, it's not tonight where you are, Anne. Where are you and what time of day is it at this precise moment?
I'm in Whitley Bay, which is in Vera country, and it's 9 o'clock in the morning. So yes, quite different.
Very different indeed. Now, I should actually tell everybody that I was so excited to be interviewing Anne, especially in Whitley Bay, because I come from just the other side of the Tyne, South Shields, and used to spend all my holidays as a child in Northumbria. So ever since I left, which was probably in the early 90s, around about, I went to university in 69, 70, but kept going back to Northumbria and left England in 84. Every time I go back, I'm back to Northumbria, to that particular landscape. So, and we will talk about landscape because I know it's so important. And of course, we've come to a complete shift in landscape with Matthew Venn. And I would really like to know where Matthew came from, because I think for you, Anne, landscape often comes first, and then the characters come out of the landscape. So tell us about Matthew Venn, who's now into his second book, The Heron's Cry. Tell us where he came from.
Yeah, you're right. It always starts with place for me. And I grew up in North Devon, where the book is set. And North Devon is seaside, but it's a bit out on a limb. It's quite hard to get to. It's north of the county of Devon, just north of Cornwall. And it's a rugged coast. It's got beaches. And when I lived there, we had lots of visitors, but they came and they stayed in holiday cottages, and it was mostly a family holiday place. Now it's gone a bit upmarket, so rich boys who are celebrating the end of their school exams go for the surfing, lots of second homers, lots of holiday homers. So the community itself has changed quite a lot since I first grew up there. But I went back. My husband died quite suddenly and quite unexpectedly, and I wanted somewhere to run away to. We have lots and lots of friends here in the Northeast, and I just wanted to escape their sympathy and their pity and just to be on my own for a bit. And I went to stay with an old school friend in Devon, in North Devon, in Barnstable. And it was really talking to her that brought Matthew Venn to life. I'd always dismissed Devon as a place to set a book because I thought it might be a bit overly cozy, a bit thatched cottage and cream teas. But talking to her and finding out her past experience, I thought that I actually could set a book there. So I was talking about her growing up, and she'd grown up in quite a restricted, enclosed religious community. Not cruel or unkind, but just very, very certain that only the people who believed as they believed would be saved and everybody else would be damned. And it just occurred to me that someone who'd grown up within that community, who lost their faith, as many people start questioning when they hit their late teens, if you lost your faith, the world would seem a very chaotic place, because Matthew would have been cast out. He would have been unfellowshipped. He wouldn't have been welcome within the family or within the community. And it occurred to me that someone like that might see within the police service a chance to find the family, the community, a sense of honour and duty, of certainty that he might be missing in the outside world. And so that's how it starts. That's how the idea for him started. And then I made him gay, and I'm not sure exactly when that happened, certainly after I'd started thinking about him. And some people have asked me, did you do that out of some sense of political correctness or because my publisher told me to? But no, it was because the people who rescued me after Tim died, who scooped me up from the hospital, who fed me wine and tea and sympathy and are still supporting me now, are a gay couple, Martin and Paul. And I think I just wanted to celebrate their relationship, and they were there in my head when I started writing. So yeah, that's how Matthew Venn came.
That's such a beautiful story. And I actually love the fact that in The Long Call, which was the first book in the series, you actually write this lovely thing to the reader at the start, where you sort of say, you've met Vera Stanhope and Jimmy Perez, and you know them, and I feel nervous introducing Matthew Venn to you, almost like a teenager bringing a new girlfriend or boyfriend home for the first time. And I hope that you like him, despite his lack of confidence and his awkwardness in company. And I just thought that was such a beautiful introduction. But people have liked him, haven't they?
They seem to have done, yes. He is very buttoned up. He's very restrained. He's quite, I think people feel some sympathy for him. And perhaps it's easier to like his husband, Jonathan, who's very outgoing and very arty and manages a community arts centre. But they are very different, and they don't have a perfect marriage, but they have a very happy marriage, I think. And I love writing that.
Yeah, I think that life in Spindrift Cottage is just so beautifully kind of realized, where, you know, there's Jonathan cooking in the kitchen and Matthew watching him from outside and appreciating how much he is kind of loved. But let's talk a little bit about the plot of the new one, The Heron's Cry. Where did that one come from? Because I believe I have heard that you are not a plotter. You start with a problem and then you want to find out what's going to happen. I mean, that's the process, as it were.
Yes, usually I write like a reader. So I write the first scene. I've got a kind of theme or a voice or an idea for the world that I want to create, but the action, the plot, no, that comes as I write. And this, I think, The Heron's Cry started with an image, almost a kind of metaphor, I suppose, of somebody blowing glass, because when you blow glass, it's molten and it moves and you can make it any shape that you want it to be. But then when it's cold, it goes hard and it'll crack. And so there are people like that, I think, who are very eager to please, who will be whatever you want them to be. And then something happens and they'll just snap and crack and crash. And so I had that image. And then I went and watched somebody blowing glass, a very skillful glassblower called Bob Crooks in Devon. A friend of mine took me to meet him, and that the studio where he works honestly looked more like a torture chamber than anything else, because it's so hot. It's got this fiery furnace and it's got these racks and racks of tools like pincers and blow torches, and it's almost like some kind of image of hell. So that helped.
Yes, absolutely. It would have done. But of course, the plot is much more complicated than that. And so you start like that, and then you launch into it, and then it unfolds. And there's an artist community central to this as well. Is that a feature of Devon as well? Is that what's happening as well?
Yeah, I think lots of artists have moved to North Devon, wood printers and glass makers. Damien Hirst has got a huge statue on the harbour at Ilfracombe. So yeah, lots of artists have always been drawn, I think, to that part of the West Country. So there is that. But then another prompt for the book starting was I was talking in a library in Ivy Bridge in South Devon, and just afterwards there were questions and comments, as there always are, and one woman stuck her hand up and said that she worked with an investigations team within the National Health Service, and I presume that she was investigating negligence claims or that sort of thing. And she said, I always say to my team, be more Vera, be dogged but be compassionate, which was lovely. But then I thought, I didn't really know that there were investigators within the NHS. That would be very interesting. But she'd gone. By the time I'd finished signing, this woman had gone, and I tried to track her down because I wanted to get more information about this investigations team, because it would be quite interesting to do. And I never did find her. The bookseller didn't know who she was, and the librarian didn't know who she was. And so I invented an organisation called Patients Together North Devon, and the head of that is our murder victim, and he is investigating the suicide of a teenage boy who seems to have dropped through the cracks with community care and hospital care. And I think it's something that we're all very much aware of, certainly here in the UK, that people with, especially adolescents with mental health problems, and especially in lockdown, have really struggled, because when you move from the adolescent care to adult care, you can somehow, there's a lack of communication and you're not properly taken care of. So that's where it started.
Isn't it interesting? Because what you're describing is all these different elements coming together but also reflecting something that's very present and happening at the moment that you're writing, so that your books are very much about what is happening around me that I can reflect and perhaps shed a light on.
Yeah, I think when we write we're trying to work out what we think about things. We're exploring our own ideas about what's going on in the world around us. And I think some writers get quite sniffy when people ask them where they get their ideas from, as if it's a ridiculous question. But actually, I find it really interesting to unpick where stories come from, because they come from all sorts of different places. And you unpick it, and you can try and work out what was in your head when you started writing.
And you've given Matthew two very interesting offsiders. You've got Jen, the single mother from Liverpool, and you've got Ross, the kind of pushy, what would you call him, sports impatient person. How do you come at those additional characters? Where do they come from? Are they similarly kind of out of the kind of landscape offsiders, you know?
Yeah, I think so. I think because there are lots of incomers who live in North Devon. So Jen is one of those. But I've also met women like her who marry too young, who have their kids too young. And then when they hit their late 30s, early 40s, they feel that they've missed out on life, that all those student adventures that other people had, they didn't get. And Jen's marriage was an awful mistake, became abusive. She managed to get posted as far away from Liverpool as she could with her teenage kids. But now she wants to live, and so she parties. I mean, man, can she party? And she's a bit promiscuous, and she's looking for a man, and she's just a bit she's just torn, really, because she does love her kids, and she wants to, there's so much guilt there. She wants to care for them properly, and she's very ambitious at work, and she wants to do that properly. But she also wants that sense that it's now her time to enjoy herself and to have her own adventures. And so, yeah, she's quite complicated, but quite fun, I think. And Ross is just very young, and he hasn't ever lived anywhere but Barnstaple. So he has very limited views. His idea of a future is to have a slightly nicer house and a slightly bigger car, and to go take his wife on holiday. He's very much into security. And I think, again, there are lots of young people who've had to be like that recently. Because when I was growing up, you know, there was so much work. I could work in a shop for 6 months, and then if I wanted, I could go traveling. It's not like that for kids now, and they're so hard to get on the housing market. And we didn't have to pay student loans back. You know, we got educated for free, but they have student loans to repay and all that sort of stuff. So I wanted someone from that generation who was reflecting that as well.
Well, he actually grows up a bit in this book. And I have to say that I read The Heron's Cry first, and then I went back and read The Long Call. And it didn't upset me in any way doing it in that order, because it was rather interesting, actually, to have experienced Ross growing up in this book and then meet him in the first book and realize just how much of a trajectory you're creating for those characters, those ancillary characters, which give you a lot more to do with them. But I wanted to ask and lead that into, because I know there's a television adaptation coming of this new series. And I wanted to ask, are we getting Jen and Ross and Matthew, the ones that you imagined in the TV series, or is there going to be a subtle kind of shifting?
I think it's the same production team. They're called Silverprint, who make Vera and Shetland. So I trust them, because I think they've done a pretty good job with Vera and Shetland. And I think they've captured very much the atmosphere and the sense of the book. The actor playing Matthew is called Ben Aldridge, and people might know him from Fleabag or Our Girl. So he's an experienced actor, but he is so committed to this role because he is gay. He did grow up in Devon, and his parents were from a Brethren community. So they were from quite a restrictive religious community. And so I think he finds in his conversation with his onstage mother who is played magnificently by Juliet Stevenson. Can you imagine Juliet Stevenson in this show? And their conversations, I think Ben found it almost cathartic to have these questions, these conversations, these discussions with Juliet Stevenson as Dorothy, his mother. So he is very, very committed to the show. Pearl Mackie plays Jen, and she's a bit different. She's still an outsider, but she's from Brixton in London rather than Liverpool. And she's an obvious outsider because she's Black British. People might know her from Doctor Who. She was Doctor Who's assistant for a couple of seasons. And Ross is very much Ross. Ross is played by a Devon lad who has still got a lot of growing up to do. So yeah, I'm absolutely delighted just by the quality of the cinematography and the music, and it very much captures the essence. There are obviously some differences, but very much captures the essence of the book, and I can't wait to see it on screen and see what people make of it.
No, I'm very excited too, but I'm also intrigued by the fact that you're not upset, and as you said, you trust this production company because they have made subtle changes. And I do remember PD James. I actually met PD James on a panel in Melbourne, and I got her very exercised talking about the adaptation of An Unsuitable Job for a Woman and what happened to Cordelia Gray, because Cordelia Gray became pregnant, and PD James was appalled by what they'd done to her character. But you don't seem to be appalled in any way whatsoever by the shifts that are made in the storylines, or even, we might say, in the representation of Vera, because Brenda Blethyn is actually, as Vera, is possibly rather less awkward and large and confronting than the Vera in your books, right?
Yeah, I think so. But firstly, I knew I always say it's a bit like a adoption. You don't do it lightly. You don't hand over your child to someone you don't trust. But once you've done that, I don't think I have the right to meddle, because I love writing the books. I know nothing about making good television. And I think the creative people behind the TV shows have a very clear vision for what they want to achieve. And me saying, oh, my Vera wouldn't do that, or my Vera doesn't look like that, would only muddle that vision and make it a lesser piece of television. And also, I'm realistic to know that I could make a great fuss about it, but they probably wouldn't listen to me anyway. I've got friends who've had adaptations, and even though they're named as executive producers on the credits, they're still not really listened to. So it just saves a lot of angst, really. And I've just been very lucky that they have got, I think, each of the 3 series. They understand the need to film it where the books are set. And that's made a huge difference. And it's not been easy, especially for Shetland, getting all the cast and crew 13 hours on a boat up to the most northern islands in the UK has not been easy, and it's cost them a lot of money. But I think the result has been worth it. And they filmed as well in North Devon, and I was there when they were for a couple of days watching them film. So we get on very well because I don't meddle.
And are you driving tourism, I wonder? I would imagine.
Certainly in Shetland. Certainly in Shetland. I think not the book so much, but certainly the TV show. Promote Shetland tell me that tourism has gone up 43% since the beginning of the books. So,
and you're
I think.
Sorry, I was just going to say, because you're the patron of the Bird Observatory there now.
I am. The rebuilding of the Bird Observatory in Fair Isle, that's where I first went. My first meeting in Shetland was to Fair Isle. I dropped out of university because in those days it didn't matter so much somehow. I wasn't happy, so I just dropped out. And a chance meeting in a pub got me a job as assistant cook in the Bird Observatory in Fair Isle. They were desperate, and they must have been desperate because I didn't know anything about birds and I couldn't cook. But off I went to Fair Isle, aged 20, I think, and just fell in love with it. Loved the island. It's only 3.5 miles long and 1.5 miles wide. And I was cooking in the observatory, which was doing quite important scientific work, monitoring vagrants and seabirds, but also a place where anybody coming to the island could stay. It had quite a comfortable hostel as well. And just 3 years ago, it burnt down. So just a freak accident. Nobody was in there. It was out of season. The warden and his family were at church. Just a freak electric accident, and it completely burnt down. So we're desperately trying to rebuild it, and I'm part of the team helping to rebuild it, along with the islanders and lots of other people. But no, if people would like to help, any royalties I make from the book Blue Lightning, which is the Shetland Perez book set in Fair Isle, will go to the rebuilding fund.
Oh, that's wonderful. Because birds, of course, feature in all of your series, and I believe that started in Fair Isle too, because of your husband, right? Who was
That's
in
right. He came as a visiting bird watcher, yeah, and then he came back the next year, and we got engaged. And yes, we had a lot of adventures together over those years.
Yes.
The 40 years that we were married.
And this new series, of course, we've got the long call, which is related to a bird called, is this the curlew? Am I remembering it?
No, it's a herring gull. Has that very long, known as the long call, which I describe in the book as I think a plaintive and inarticulate cry of pain, which sort of works for that.
Yes. So is this series going to have sort of bird related titles? Because I know you're quite clever about your titles and theming, right?
No, I wanted to call the Heron's Cry I wanted to call it the glassblower because of that central image, but my editor said, no, you can't do that. You've already got a Vera book called The Glass Room, so you'll have to think of something else. And they suggested the Heron's Cry, but I've never heard a heron cry. And we weave that actually into the story as well. The fact that not many people have heard a heron cry is part of the
one of the things
in-joke.
Indeed. When I was doing my research and on your career, and I was actually astonished that you had written so much before Raven Black, which was the first of the Shetland series, really broke in 2006. You had a series with somebody called Greg Palmer Jones, who was a naturalist, and then there was an Inspector Ramsey. You had quite a lot of books.
I did. I published a book a year between 1986 and 2006. So I was 20 years working before having any commercial success at all. I mean, I was published every year by a mainstream publisher, but I was never paid before I delivered the manuscript. So no upfront advance or anything like that. I always had to have a day job. But that was actually wonderful because it gave me a chance to practice writing without any sort of pressure at all. I had to make contacts with libraries and with bookstores, indie bookstores, because none of the mainstreams chains were going to take my books. So yeah, it was great practice.
I was going to say,
this year coming, 2022 is going to be my 30th year of being published by the same publisher. So we're going to have lots of cake, I think, and a bit of champagne, I'm hoping.
I would hope so too. But I was going to ask you about those books, because clearly that was practicing the craft, right? And if you look back at those very early books that you wrote, and you look at the one that you've just written, what is the difference? What is now the thing that you do that you didn't know that you needed to do then, or what has changed?
I think that I am more confident. So the plots are more complex, they're more detailed. The books are certainly bigger now. They were very slender in the 1980s, 1990s. But I think people will be able to see for themselves, because I think there are plans, because of the 30th anniversary, to reprint those early books. They're much more golden age, because that was what I was reading really when I started writing. So George Palmer Jones is an amateur sleuth. He's quite wealthy. He's got a double-barreled name, went to a good school, all that, you know, not quite Lord Peter Wimsey, but in the same sort of vein. And he tripped over bodies in nature reserves and in the countryside. So, and then Inspector Ramsey actually was very much a forerunner, I think, for Vera, because they were set in the Northeast. We moved here in 1987. We moved to the North in 1987. And it seemed to me immediately that the villages here allowed for that sort of village noir type book, the sort of book that Christie might have written, because you couldn't do that in the South anymore, because people just don't know each other's business in the same way. If you live in a pretty village near London, it's going to be mostly commuters who aren't there during the day. But the village that we moved into, Holywell, was a former pit village, also quite agricultural. There was farmland all around, and everybody knew absolutely everybody else.
Yes.
I was quite poorly at one point, and I remember walking the kids to school, and somebody I'd never met in my life, a little elderly woman, popping out of the council house as I walked past and saying, "Pet, I was so sorry to hear you'd not been well." I didn't know who this woman was, but word had got out.
Yes.
And so you could write that enclosed village murder mystery in that setting in a way that I don't think you could credibly in a more affluent village in the South.
Well, I mean, hearing you kind of approximate a bit of a Geordie accent, you know, pet, I just suddenly thought what my dad would say, "You're not feeling so clever then." Because, you know, there's a wonderful dialect which Brenda manages to get, you know, really well in Vera. But it's the voices, it's the sound of that part of the world that is so.
It is, I think. It is, and it's the sense that people do care about each other. And there is still that sense of community that we have here. And that's great to write about. I love writing about that.
Yes, everybody's pet, and the woman in the bread shop used to call me Lover. Hello, Lover. How are you doing?
Yeah. Or Hinny is another lovely one, I think. In rural Northumberland, you're more likely to be Hinny.
Indeed. And we've got a lot of people from libraries with us tonight, and I wanted, because I know that you have been a very strong advocate for a movement called Reading for Wellbeing, and you've been very involved with libraries. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about that work that you've been doing.
Yeah, Reading for Wellbeing came out of a kind of challenge I threw out at a speech I made at a Public Health England conference. And it was March 2020, so just before lockdown. And I was asked along to this health inequalities conference, I think to give a bit of light relief, to tell stories, because that's what I do. And the rest of the people there were very serious and had graphs and were really showing that poverty is a major cause of ill health. And so I told my stories, and then at the end I threw out this challenge and said that for me, when I'd been poorly or I'd been caring for people who were ill, what helped was reading, because you can escape into fiction, and you can, if you've got odd ideas rattling around in your head, if you're a bit depressed or a bit anxious, or you're suffering chronic pain through arthritis or other things, then getting inside somebody else's head for a bit is a major relief. So and we've got something, I don't know if you have it in Australia, called social prescribing, where family doctors can prescribe membership of a gym or referral to an addiction clinic, or referral to help with debt. Because I was talking to a local GP, and he said that 40% of the people who come to him, he works in quite a deprived area, don't have problems that he can help with. It's other sort of problems that they have. So I was thinking, why can't we bring these two together, and let's have doctors who can prescribe membership of a reading group, or meeting up with another individual who can recommend books that will make them laugh or will engage them. And so I said, I will sponsor 2 project workers, 2 reading project workers. Can you match fund that? And we've ended up, astoundingly, we launched the scheme officially just a couple of weeks ago, with 9 project workers over 4 local authorities. And we've already done some events, bringing people together. And so GPs are referring people to reading project workers. And we're going, well, and more importantly, I think we've got a really good research grant. So we've got our 2 major universities in Newcastle, Northumbria and Newcastle, are evaluating. We've managed to get an organisation called Opening the Book, who work very closely with libraries to organise some bespoke training for us. So everybody will go through the same training, which will help them look at what books might make you feel happy or help you to understand what's going on in your life, or reading group books. And yeah, so we'll see how it all works, but I'm absolutely so proud of it, of the scheme.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. But prior to that, you'd already started kind of producing kits for libraries. And I came across something which I think our librarians might want to hear about, which is called Bannocks and Blood, where you stage a mystery in the library with cake and bannocks and recipes, and there's recipes attached.
Yeah, that's the Shetland one. But I think if you go onto the Pan Macmillan, my publisher website, you'll find a number, because there's also one around The Darkest Evening, which is the most recent Vera book. And there we even have actors doing it for you, because it was locked down and people couldn't get together in libraries. So people could do it as a Zoom event. Library readers can do it as a Zoom event with the actors reading the parts. So there are 3 or 4, I think, murder mystery packs. You can just go onto the website, you get the scripts, you just need someone prepared to host it and to read the parts. And it's all the instructions are there as well. So it's a great event for libraries to do, and you can either do it online or you can do it in person when we're allowed. And the Bannocks and Blood one is set in Shetland, and there are recipes for bannocks.
I love it, because the recipes seem to be by local people in Shetland as well.
They are, yeah, no, pulled together by the wonderful Karen Fraser, who's the head of Shetland Libraries, and her staff. So yeah, and we did it. We had a wonderful event. We did it first in a community centre on the west side of Shetland.
I think you'll be giving our creative director, Catherine, ideas about the next thing that we might do, which could involve cake.
I think it's just great fun, and we've done it as a fundraiser for charities, and we've done it just to bring people together. It's entirely free, and you can print out the script. You can also print out tickets and posters, so they're just ready for you to go.
Well, Anne, I'm going to alert people to the fact that we're opening up for questions, and I can see there's already some in the Q&A, but I've got one last rather big question for you.
Right.
And it's really, and it's interesting because it comes out of the reading for wellbeing, but I kind of want to come back to crime fiction, and I want to ask you a question that I'm often asked, and to see what you say, which is really, what do you think crime fiction does that other genres can't do? Why do we love crime so much?
I think there is a number of reasons why we love it. I think Val McDermott, who I know you've talked to, will say that it's a way of experiencing fear vicariously. We can sort of process our anxiety through it. I think I write much more domestic crime fiction, and I think what people read my books for is that sense of resolution and justice at the end. There is a sense, and we need it. Yeah, the last few years with the politics in the US, and for us Brexit and COVID, and not just being quite sure what the future is going to hold. And it does give a sense that all will be well in the end, and justice will be done, and order will be restored. And I think that's why crime has been with us, certainly has been particularly popular during lockdown, especially traditional crime. And I think that's what it's given us.
Yeah. I also think it helps to explain what what in real life is the inexplicable, you know, the things that happen.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely that.
We've got some lovely questions coming up. And the first one here is from Wendy, who says, she knows about the Matthew Venn series, but she asks, is it going to be a standalone, is the series going to be a series based on each book or a series based on the book series? You know, it's kind of like, Vera is one book, right? Yeah.
No, this is going to be 4 episodes, and it is just the long call. So it's one story over 4 episodes. And then obviously, if that's successful and the ratings are good, we're hoping that they'll do more featuring Matthew Venn. But at the moment, no, it's one story. And that time, I think, gives them the space to explore Matthew's issues, his relationship with his mother, and I think to explore all the other characters. I wanted this time to write an ensemble piece. So it's not just about the central detective. It is about other people in the community. So it's not just the police, but it's Jonathan and the Woodyard, the Arts Centre. But there's also a returning character called Lucy Braddock, who's a woman with Down syndrome, and her dad, Morris, who appear in both books. So I do see it much more as a community that will return, certainly in the books, and fingers crossed in television too.
Lovely, thank you. Julie Regan and Julie Evans, I think we've probably answered your questions, which were about the name of the new series and does Anne mind when things have changed in the TV series. This one's from Jenny, and she says, do you know how many books Matthew Venn has in him?
Not yet. No, people wonder about that, but I don't plan the book in advance. I certainly don't plan the series in advance. For example, Raven Black was definitely going to be a standalone novel. My very young editor at the time said, I love this book. I'll do everything I can to promote it, but it will have to be a standalone novel because it would stretch credibility too far to have more than one murder novel set in Shetland. Well, then it won the Gold Dagger, which is like the Oscars of crime writing here, and everybody was astounded because it's not something that a mid-list author usually wins. And so she came back and said, well, maybe it could run to a short series. So it was going to be 4 books, but after 4 books, there were still things that I wanted to say about Shetland and about Jimmy Perez. So it ran to 8. But then I'd kind of run out of stuff to say then, and I wanted to stop before I got bored and before the reader got bored. It's easier with Vera because it's a much wider palette of backgrounds here in the Northeast, because yes, we have those beautiful uplands and the beaches and the castles and Hadrian's Wall, but we also have a very interesting post-industrial landscape, the villages where the pits used to be, where the ships used to be built. And we've got a very thriving city of Newcastle and Gateshead. So I've got lots of different places to set my books up in the Northeast. So there will be more Veras, certainly.
Yes, well, that sort of answers Gillian's question, where she said, have you thought about setting a Shetland book during the Shetland Wool Week, which attracts textile lovers from all around the world each year? It's on this week, but only on Zoom.
It is. It is, and I've been there for Wool Week, and I've got friends there. My best Shetland friend is called Ingrid, and I met her on Fair Isle. She was a crofter there, and she spins and she weaves and she knits lots, and she works in the textile museum. So yeah, she's like Wool Week Incorporated. But I have been there, and I've done events actually in Wool Week, and it's hilarious because I'm there in Mariel, which is the big arts centre in Lerwick, and we're doing our talk, and in the front row there's a row of people all knitting away, still knitting while they're there. So I'm very aware of Wool Week, even though, and I did knit a bit when I was in Fair Isle because you had to. I had a wonderful hand knitted, fully patterned jumper by one of the Fair Islanders that would be a museum piece now, I think.
Wow. Yes, I work with people who knit in meetings, and I've been tempted, but I haven't taken it up yet. And I don't think I can knit anything sterile. The patterns are too complicated.
No, but they're actually easy because it's just pearl or plain, and all you have to do is follow the bit of graph paper to get the pattern right.
Oh, that sounds hard to me. There's just a comment here from Anne Collier. It's just to let you know, she was in Dubai a few years ago and attended a literary session when you and Ian Rankin were in conversation.
That's right.
It was wonderful, and there was a group there from the Shetlands.
Oh, right. I didn't know that. Yes, that was where I told Ian and I were having a conversation, and I was saying that at that point I was planning to end the Shetland series, and he turned to me and he said, well, good luck with that. Obviously he'd had less success trying to end Rebus, so that was an interesting moment.
Yes,
but
indeed.
I think as you'll know, worldwide, but certainly within the UK, crime writers are a very friendly bunch, I think. Yes. Because in the past, reviewers have been a bit snooty about us. We stick together and we support each other very well. It's true in Australia too. It really is. And I've experienced it over the years that I've been to crime events. It's just what an amazing sense of camaraderie there is between the writers. You know, everybody. I think so, yeah. Else. But as for killing off your favorite character, remember Conan Doyle had that problem. He did too. Yes, he did. And really, it was writers like Ian and John Harvey who made me realize that I could write traditional crime fiction, but I didn't need that traditional central character. I didn't need the amateur sleuth who had money and a great education, that I could write about people that I knew. So that's I really learned quite a lesson by reading those, and my other inspiration, I suppose, was translated crime fiction. So Simenon's Maigret has always been a huge favorite, and I would urge any aspiring crime writer to read him, because he is so tight and so spare. And in one sentence, he can do multiple things. So he can set a scene, he can describe a character, and he can move a plot on. And his books are very, very slim, but he wrote so beautifully, I think. And there's some great new translations of his work out now. I was lucky enough to meet his son and was just talking about Maigret to him. And Simenon, one of the things that Simenon says about Maigret is that his role is to understand, not to judge. And I think that's something that contemporary crime writers are all trying to do. Isn't that amazing? Well, that's amazing. I've read some Maigret, but I suspect that the translations were not that fantastic, you know. And it does, you really want that element of the echoing the beauty of his prose in all its fairness. Yeah. Yeah, there are some great new ones now. I'll look them up. Marie has a question. She says, Anne, are you surprised at the answers to plotting problems that seem to emerge at times? Do you surprise yourself unexpectedly from your writer's unconscious mind? Yeah, all the time. And it's wonderful when it happens. And it's really hard when it doesn't happen, because I don't plot and I don't know where the story is going. There are times when I really, really, really get very stuck. And my answer to that is to go for a walk. I'm very lucky. I'm only a few minutes from the sea, so I'll go and walk along the coast, along Whitley Bay Promenade, or out to Cullercoats Bay, or up to St Mary's Lighthouse. And I'll walk and walk and walk, and eventually, without thinking too much about it, something will come to me. Of course, that's what I need to do. That's how it's going to work out. And then long train journeys are brilliant for that, because if you're sat on a train, you can't really be doing anything else. And just sitting and watching the countryside zoom past, I get some good ideas on trains. So yeah, and sometimes you don't actually know what a book is about until you've almost finished it. So with The Long Call, I was looking on the first draft for some kind of cohesion to bring it all together. And it was only as I was getting near the end that I realized this is about powerful men covering up a crime. And the cover-up becomes more toxic than the original crime. And I think we've seen that we've seen that in politics quite often. Watergate was about the cover-up. It was not about the original crime. It was the cover-up that did for Nixon. And again, it was powerful white men who were doing the cover-up. And still, I think, so it was at the end of the first draft that I really realized what the book was about. And then I was able to go back and rewrite bits. And so it held together a bit better.
So literally you have to walk away and just keep walking until it comes.
Yeah, until something happens. I think because for 20 years I had no commercial success, at that point it had to be fun. You know, I was doing it as a hobby. I had a day job. I was being published and I was getting paid a bit for it, but really not very much. So it had to be enjoyable. And I think if I'd known how a book ended, there would have been no fun in that, really. The fun is in finding out, along with the detectives, what's happening. And that's still the way I write. And it's quite scary. I'm just starting a new book now and I'm already a bit stuck, just 10,000 words in and thinking, what? And I need to find what the book is about again. I need that, either a central image or a central theme, and then I'll have more of an idea where I'm going with it.
Yeah.
And for police books, I think certainly here, so much more of police time is spent doing, or because our social services have been cut so much. So much police time is spent looking for vulnerable kids who've run away from care, or looking for people with dementia who've wandered from an old people's home. Or because, as in the Heron's Cry, mental health provision is lacking in some places, that we can look at areas of social justice and of societal problems and it still be credible when we're writing a police procedural.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, and maybe it is police procedural, maybe it isn't, but there's a lovely question from Anne Mack who says, can Dr. Cleeves prescribe a book that she has read recently and could recommend?
Oh, yeah, well, lots. Let me think. Oh, I'll tell you, I'll do one that's very, very current and will be out next month. I'm great friends with Louise Penny, who writes the Three Pines novel, a Canadian writer. And she has teamed up with her friend Hillary Clinton to write a political thriller. And it's called The State of Terror. And I've just read proof of that. And I would, for anybody who it's very different from Louise's other books, which again are quite domestic and gentle. This is a real political thriller. And the Secretary of State is called Ellen and her best friend Betsy. And they're on planes and it's set in the Middle East and it's back in Washington and it looks at domestic politics, but also international politics. And it's just a really good, rollicking thriller. And I'd certainly recommend that. But I've also just read one of my favorite, just happen to have this here, Chris Hammer's Opal Country. And I love Chris Hammer's books, and a great Australian crime writer.
Opal Country must be called Treasure and Dirt here.
Oh, it must be.
I've just read it and reviewed it. It's just been released here, but it doesn't have that name. It's the fourth, and it's set in the Finnegan's, whatever it's called, Finnegan's Drift or wherever it is, out in the west of Burke, and there's an opal miner crucified in his mine. Right. Same book, different title.
Yes, but great. I loved Scrublands and I liked Silver. And this takes us back really to Scrublands country, to the drought and the heat. And I don't know if you agree, but two great central characters with Ivan and Nell, and I hope they come back.
Yes, I'm describing it as the Hammerverse, since he's now taking up other characters from his books and putting them center stage. And no, I love this book too.
Oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I did.
And Scrublands. And just by the way, the Hillary Clinton and Louise Penny book, I'm also reviewing the James Patterson Bill Clinton book, because Bill Clinton has teamed up with James Patterson. And
that's right.
But it's intriguing reading them because you keep thinking, is that what Bill Clinton thought? Is that how he thought as when he was president? And I'm sure you were doing the same thing when you were reading.
I was thinking, how would you survive spending that long on planes? And I'm sure the Secretary of State did spend lots of time zipping around the world. I just wouldn't be fit to get off a plane after an overnight long plane journey and then go and be sensible in any sort of important meeting, but they obviously did. So but it's great.
Traveling business class or first or in a private jet, I think.
I'm sure, but yeah, still not quite sure that I'd be able to do it. But it's great fun, but it's also very thought-provoking. So I'm certainly very happy to recommend that one too.
Okay, last question coming up, because we're coming up to time, and it's from Nicola, and she says, the house that Matthew lives in sounds like the cottage that Henry Williamson lived in for a while. Is that likely? I was born and brought up in Westward Ho, so I'm loving this North Devon series. Now, I don't know who Henry Williamson was.
Oh, Henry Williamson wrote Tarka the Otter, so he's quite famous in North Devon. I don't think it is, because I think he lived in Croyd or George Ham, and this house, it's not really a cottage, it's a sort of low, quite big house. The one in my head is on Crow Point, but the one in the TV series is filmed in Appledore, so she needs to look out for that and see if she recognises that one too.
Okay, I think we might have time for just one more quick one, which is it's actually quite a big one. I'll give you one answer. Anne, what did you read when you were a child, a young adult?
I read whatever I could get my hands on, but always I did love mysteries. They were my comfort reading. So Enid Blyton, Malcolm Saville, and then moved on quite quickly to the Sherlock Holmes short stories and the G.K. Chesterton, Father Brown short stories.
Okay, I can match you there. That definitely Enid Blyton. She was such a prolific writer, and I think she engaged so many young writers in that adventure mystery world.
She did, but then I did realise that she wasn't that brilliant when I read other people, but she was great to start us off and get us going, I think.
Absolutely.
Very, very compulsive.
Well, it was all those exclamation marks, I think.
And the picnics.
And the picnics, lashings of ginger beer. And it's been an absolute delight. I'm going to hand back to Catherine now to say farewells, but just thank you so much. And what a great...
Thank you. It's been lovely to meet you, and thanks to everybody who's watching. I wish I could be there in person next time. I will be.
Right. Have you been to Australia yet?
Yeah, I've done a number of events. So yes, I've been there, and just waiting to come back.
We'll invite you. Hope to see you then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely, we'll invite you. I'll get straight onto Pam McMillan and say, right, as soon as she can get on a plane, put her on a plane. But even though it is a fairly long journey, sorry about that. But anyway, you'll be able to get here. Look, that was just the most engrossing conversation. I mean, I'm so sorry to be interrupting it, really, let's be honest. I think everybody could listen for ages. And I said somebody from Bathurst Libraries already come up with a cake idea. So this one may work, may run and run. In fact, we've already for our December live festival, Touchwood, we've got a cake and tea event with sort of, like cozy crime, some very thin stories, and just lots of fun. I thought the ones who want to get the champagne can, the ones who want to stick to tea can, and we can just have tea cake and lots of fun. But the other thing that was a real coincidence is that our next event is actually with Chris Hammer. So
brilliant! I'll send him my best wishes. Tell him
I will. Okay, so you see, another reason to come. This is, you're just going to have to get here soon. But look, thank you so much. That was, as I said, engrossing, and so very generous of you, Anne, to talk about the development of your work and that what led you to write certain books, and just to really, I could see from the comments that people were just reveling, I think, and a very warm and very nurturing, I think might be the word as well. So thank you so much. And there we are. Bad September for us. We've had a wonderful 4 weeks. We'll meet again in what I've called Aussie October for Chris Hammer and Tim Aliff, who will actually be taking turns interviewing each other, which I think might be quite fun. We'll get to know them pretty well by the end. And also in November, Abir Mukherjee will be talking to us, English.
Oh, he's brilliant.
Yeah,
if you've not read him, read him. You'll have a wonderful, I've read a couple. And he's a charmer too.
Is he? So, well, that's always nice. Another charmer. Good. Well, we're going to have lots of fun. And what we're really looking forward to as well is meeting as many of our listeners as we can in person in December. It's the second year this has happened, but I think we're going to be lucky. Touch wood, crossed fingers. We've got a podcast so people can listen to our podcast, and we've got a Facebook all about crime book club. So there's lots of ways that crime lovers can connect with Bad and get their crime fix, as it were. So jump onto the Booktopia website and buy all of Anne's books. And I'm sure you've all enjoyed the evening as much as I have. Thank you so much again, Anne and Sue. See you soon in Australia, Anne, we hope, and see all our listeners soon too.
Thank you very much. Thanks to everybody. Bye-bye. Bye.